I'm zooming in from Silicon Valley in Redwood City here. Yep.
Okay. All right. So we're both on California time.
That's
Very
right.
good.
Okay,
That's right.
I'd like to introduce you both, but I'm going to let Chris introduce Greg. Greg introduce Chris because you guys know each other. Chris, phenomenal star, been around for a long time. Large size investments, covers the globe in terms of understanding global investment trends, strategies, been involved in lots of startups. Greg, if you want to, if you follow Greg and make investments like he does in various companies, maybe you'll be on the panel telling us what to do next and how to learn things. So both Chris and Greg have been friends of Link2. We appreciate all the effort and time that you give us, the advice that you give us. Hopefully we're learning to make a better company for the rest of us. Thank you. I'll let you guys continue for a bit and then I'll jump in when it's time for me.
We all learn a lot from Greg, you know, in the boardroom. The strategic advisory meetings of Link2 obviously benefit a lot from your presence there, Greg. So happy to be moderating this conversation with you. You know, we all know that Greg is a very successful early stage investor, you know, having been the very early investor in Twitter and Square. And so the theme is really about global investment and also for unicorns, right? So because I wanted to just share a few highlights of Greg's career before we turn it over to Greg, because I think this is very relevant to our discussion today about unicorns. And as you all know, Greg is the CEO of Global ID. I think the past 5 years, Greg, you've been running this shop. You know, this is about identity for everyone, everywhere. So 5 years you've been doing this already. What I would add is that in the last 11 years, you've also been investing very actively through your entity hierarchy in more than 100 companies. So earlier and also in the past, I think Kareem and others have mentioned that some of your portfolio names are like Shift Technologies and obviously Uphold, Coinbase and Robinhood. These are all well-known names that we know that are part of your portfolio. And before that, I think you know, you also spent a couple of years with Ripple as the first chief risk officer. So clearly, there's a lot of you know, sort of like startup background. What I would also add, and maybe this is something that the audience don't really know very much, is you spent also 9 years, right, with Promontory Financial earlier, you know, based on the East Coast. You know, your colleague Gene Ludwig was the founder, and he's also one of Obama's guy. And you know, speaking of the government, you also spent 2 years with the U.S. Fed. So in the sort of like early 2000 decade. And I would be also remiss if I don't mention that you started your other company, Dispatch Management, and for about 10 years you ran that, and eventually you took it to IPO on the NASDAQ market. And so that was all, I think, you know, things that are relevant to today's discussion. And also, I mean, as a strategy advisor and consultant, after 6 years with Booz Allen, that gives you a lot of experience in the corporate world too. Now, I mean, if we add up all those numbers, people are probably going to think that you are almost like 90 years old, and you know, you know.
I'm not a day over 80.
Warren Buffett is 91, and but you know, you're still a young guy in good shape because you're also an athlete, right? I remember that people have told me, you know, you spent many years like leading the National Outdoor Leadership School and also running the Outward Bound School for many years. And you stay in very great shape. So maybe you can give us a bit more update on just kind of like, you know, how are you parallel processing all these things? And more importantly, the update on Global ID, and also how are you spending your time, Greg?
Sure. Thanks, Christopher, for making me feel really old.
But you look young, but your experience is almost like Warren Buffett.
Youngish. Well, so look, I mean, Global ID is really our attempt to have everybody have a seat at the table. So I do feel like I've been very fortunate to get to see a lot of these opportunities, but one of these questions is whether it is getting to invest in these startup companies, but just to get anybody a seat at the table. We just saw the presentation before talking about farmers, and really the question we have, shouldn't any and everyone be able to participate in the digital economy? And a bunch of the innovations I've seen, a bunch of the opportunities I've seen, to me, it's an embarrassment sometimes as to like, why can't more people participate in that? And I hear people talk about, whether the economy and is rigged, and it is to some extent rigged. We have all the people that are members of Link2. We help people get an accreditation that they're an accredited investor. That's great. But one of my questions is, instead of letting people that aren't that fortunate just do things like go to a casino or buy a lottery ticket, why shouldn't everyone be able to get the kind of opportunities that are happening at Link2? And one of my goals would be to make that world possible. Yes, there should be controls that are like suitability controls to make sure that people don't invest too much of their income or their assets in any one investment. But whether it's GameStop or the next Coinbase, I don't see why people shouldn't have an ability to save money how they want to save. I have to say that right now, this time of our lives, there's more opportunities than ever with new things like DeFi and these non-fungible tokens, which has really been a revolution for me. More ways for everyone to get in the game. But they're going to need something like a Link2 so they can do that efficiently. I remember when I used to sell some of my first shares of Twitter stock on Shares Post, those transactions would take 6 weeks and cost me $5,000 to sell any amount of shares. So it was just a huge amount of friction. It was very exclusive. And so really the goal of Global ID is to let everyone be able to do things digitally, whether it's financially, whether it's voting, whether it's medical records, whether it's sharing the car keys, whether it's monetizing your own content. And we do believe that the future should not be controlled by a single government or a single company. So it is that protocol standard, and that is unifying across all these different themes.
Right. So let me pick up 2 points you mentioned. One is the NFT, right, and then the second piece is the monetizing your own content, right? So we heard quite a bit from Tim earlier about NFT. So this is an area that I know our audience is definitely very, very interested in learning more, right? So can you say a bit more about the space, non-fungible sort of like token? And then, after that, if you can also expand a bit more about, the business models and new companies that are really doing a good job in helping investors and companies monetizing content. So those are the 2 areas. If you could expand a bit more, would be great for our audience. Great.
Right. Well, the first thing, let me just take a step back. Sort of the internet 1.0 was powered by a lot by advertising. So sites like Twitter and Facebook and YouTube, you come to their sites, you see content, and you're forced to look at ads. And okay, that got us to where we are today. But I personally hate ads. Whether they're targeted or not. Like I just don't want to look at ads. And quite frankly, I'm willing to pay for good content. And this is not some new radical business model. Like cable companies figured that out a long time ago. People like Netflix, people will pay to be able to see a certain amount of content without ads. And so the question today is with the new technologies out there, can you make all content monetizable, not through advertising, but preserving the rights of the creator and possibly the distributor in the content itself? So when you create a new movie, or even before you created a new movie, if you know that Tom Cruise is going to be in it and it's going to be called Top Gun 2, can you not sell 100,000 tickets before you even put pen to paper to sign the contract for the movie? Can you pre-fund the movie by selling a ticket, which is, if you, again, a non-fungible token? It could means that this ticket can't be used 3 times. It can just be used once. And so
that's a unique identification.
It's a unique identification.
Similar to the global ID concept, it's unique.
Right. So global ID so far has been for individuals and groups. Each has a unique identifier, but why not for things? In fact, some things like a diamond may last longer than we people do. And so if you can create a unique identifier for these things, some of which are like one of a kind, like a Mona Lisa, but some of which are just limited edition, like tickets to a movie if you decide that you're only going to make so many, or I found this box of cards when I was a kid. I collected those early, like Pete Rose, Carl Yastrzemski baseball cards from the 1960s. And now it turns out some of those are worth thousands of dollars, or I have some original early Batman cards. How do I go to a dealer, the equivalent of Sotheby's, or, but for baseball cards, and get that party to vouch for, basically give an appraisal on those cards, and then enter them into a registry? And so we have a whole new class of assets. Some are completely virtual, some are physical cards, but whether they are created and tokenized at the time of creation, of manufacture, at the time of sale, or after the fact by people who already own them, this whole new realm of value creation in our society can now be tokenized and made another form of value that can be exchanged. And that could lead to incredible asset utilization. So just imagine now that you could have a secured credit card that's drawing against your baseball card collection. So you have a whole bunch of ways of new intermediation between all the value creation that's already happening and is happening today. And so that is super fascinating. I have no idea why just this particular year it's been that aha moment, but it's all moving in that direction now. And there's a whole new generation of companies and a whole new extension of our wallets. I mean, it was one thing when our wallets went from fiat currency to commodities to crypto, but now to have all this new additional set of assets in our wallets, it's like we discovered, a whole new form of energy that was just lurking beneath the surface, and it's been tapped. And so that's going to power the next generation of unicorns. And so I'm just getting educated. I got my biggest education
in here. We're all getting educated
from my 13-year-old daughter, who showed how on her game platform she operates an escrow, and how people game the escrow system for putting these tokenized assets in, and they switch them at the last moment, and all these recommendations. And so when I'm getting educated by a 13-year-old, you know that there's something there. And I'm really excited about getting up to speed.
Yeah. So you're mentioning a whole generation of companies with their business model basically building on monetization of content. And you mentioned the subscription model, which is something that is better than the ad model that
yes.
Yeah, you mentioned.
So it could either be pay-per-view, it could be tipping, it could be subscription, it could be a combination of those, it could be assets that aren't tradable. Like in the old days, I used to buy plane tickets and trade them with other people and use different segments out of order, so things can either be not tradable or tradable. I think a lot of these things are going to be tradable. And the interesting thing is, usually when people trade them, they call it scalping, the original creator or distributor doesn't get a piece of it. But with smart contracts, you can embed into the content itself the ability for the creator or distributor or sub-distributor to get a piece of subsequent transactions. And you can also retain the creator's ultimate control over the content if they so wish. And so that flexibility of putting the economic rights of content into the content itself, it's kind of a scary thing for people like Amazon and Netflix, because it doesn't matter where you discover the content. You might have discovered it just by following Oprah on Instagram. And if she really likes a movie or something and you discover it there and you click on it, she might get a % of that. You might watch the movie, and there's no Netflix or no Amazon. There's a content creator went directly to the market through an influencer, and you flattened the world. Creates a whole new set of power for both creators and what I call informal distributors. It could be any person, any cause, any group that has part of the attention economy. And so you don't need to have a formal company that has a bunch of exclusive contracts that exclude other people from being able to access that content except through that platform. It creates a direct linkage between creators and influencers and audiences. And whenever the world is flatter, it's a scramble, and a whole new set of players might come out on top. So I have no reason to believe that folks that dominate distribution today are going to be the dominant players 10 years from now.
Right. Yeah. Well, that topic will deserve another panel, I think, later on. Well, we have the benefit of you being here with us today, and we talked about many tradable assets in the past, XRP being one, and I think earlier today the subject of Ripple also came up a couple of times. Yeah. So now with the new potential, I think, confirmation of Gary Gensler, right? So we're expecting a new SEC chair. So is there any maybe positive view that you can share on the Ripple situation with SEC, and anything you care to comment on that?
Well, I just saw Ripple's latest response to the amended complaint from the SEC.
Right.
And they used an analogy that I've been putting out there, which is that essentially what the SEC has said is that is people can't tell the difference between
gold and the gold mine.
Yeah, gold and gold. But they used the even further analogy. I said, look, if I give a partner a diamond ring to get engaged for us to get married, it doesn't mean that he or she goes to the newspaper and starts reading about the De Beers Diamond Company because I gave them a diamond ring.
Well, for sure. It doesn't happen with my wife. I gave her some diamond, but then she's got no interest in holding shares of De Beers Company, which is the mining company.
And so it comes kind of down to an issue that's been a political issue. Is your general view that people are, I hate to say, are people, I don't want to use the word stupid, but can people not be responsible for themselves of understanding risks? We obviously let them go into a casino. We let them buy lottery tickets. They can buy, they're going to be able to buy all these non-fungible tokens. But we're saying that in this particular case, that the SEC doesn't think that people can tell the difference between XRP and the Ripple company. And that when they are buying XRP, I mean, the case treats me as a victim because I bought or negotiated for a lot of XRP. I also have Ripple stock. And essentially what they're saying is that I don't know the difference. And I find that really annoyingly dismissive of people's ability to have common sense. And so the general narrative there is that people can't tell the difference between XRP and Ripple. And then there's 1,000 other companies out there that did actual ICOs. And it's sort of suggesting that whether it's Ripple or Brave or Filecoin or Solana or any of these things that people can't tell the difference, and therefore to protect them, we have to destroy them. And it's one of those crazy arguments that like you have five mission principles for the SEC, and they come out with an action that violates every single one of those. And so Ripple is very succinctly, you don't have to read the whole thing. It's 100 pages long, but if you just read the first 8 pages, it really clearly lays out the notion that the SEC has basically just gone on a flyer, and is anything that's in their mission statement, they're now doing the exact opposite thing. And so
clearly there's a huge difference between owning diamond versus owning De Beers shares. And I would even extend that, by saying I eat a lot of Chipotle Mexican food, but I don't own the shares of Chipotle. So there's a huge difference between the two.
And also, I mean, this is 2000. I mean, this action started in 2020. Last time I looked, I was around, Ripple in 2013, and we spent a whole bunch of time just basically fighting with the FinCEN over whether we need to be registered as a money service business. And we finally said, all right, okay, we get it. We agree it's a currency. And now years later, they're saying, forget that. It's not a currency. Look, the same battle with the IRS. They're like, well, it's a commodity. And so, it's like a physics experiment where, hey, look, I've invented this new thing. It's a gas, it's a solid, it's a liquid all at once. And so there is no sense of responsibility, at least in the US government, that there be any coordination between the regulatory organizations to create clarity and certainty. And when you don't have that, you have FUD, fear, uncertainty, dread, which is a deterrent to basically raising capital and to protecting investors. And those are the 2 highest mission objectives of the SEC, and we're getting none of that. So I'm pleading and would consider a private action through myself or my company or foundation to simply beg the SEC for clarity. Don't in 2019, when Coinbase comes to you and says, hey, you know, do you guys think that XRP is a security and that we shouldn't list it? Don't just go silent and let hundreds of thousands or millions more people buy it just so you can pull the rug out from them a year later. You had 8 years to express your concerns and you never did. And it's not okay to simply say, if it's a security, we'll regulate it. That's like a Tony Soprano type thing that, you know, we'll pull the rug out from you whenever we want to. And, you know, it's really more a statement of authority than a statement of principle. And that's not the model we aspire to. Like, you know, I'm not at the Fed. I can't invoke the Fed anymore.
You were at the Fed. Yeah.
I was at the Fed. And you know, I mean, you don't have to be like Tony Soprano. I mean, when you're a regulator, you have a responsibility for rules making, and you don't have to do everything by enforcement. And certainly not 8 years after the fact, as if time machines exist and you could go back and like re-adjudicate who won the Super Bowl in 2013. I don't want our country to be a poster child for that kind of banana behavior.
Understand. Greg, so you mentioned earlier one of your portfolio companies, Filecoin, right? So this is a company that is very global. And when I first got on that website, in fact, the Chinese version of Filecoin.io came up. So I mean, so are you seeing a lot of impact from maybe Asian countries like China and others in basically the world that we're operating in now? And if you could share a bit more international perspective today to our audience, because many of them are zooming in from overseas, it would be great.
Well, China's amazing, whether it's their version of Filecoin or Polkadot, or like each of these, which is like sort of their version of Ether. I mean, the Chinese, I went over when I was with Ripple, right? And they were very polite. They asked a lot of good questions, and it was clear that they're trying to figure out like what's the cutting edge, and they're going to do it in a technologically sort of equivalent way, but with a Chinese flair and a Chinese bent. And so given that they're able to do that, and they don't have some of the, I mean, they have their own challenges in China, but these are all legitimate. And China's a big enough market that it's its own alternate reality. And for some of these technologies, they scale beyond Chinese borders. The challenge always with investing in China, I've had a hard time with my Asia investments, is like, what are you allowed to do and not do in China? I have a number of investments, companies I like EMQ, which allows you to basically attach a WeChat wallet to like a Grab wallet in Indonesia, or Sitcon, which is taking the QR code technology from WeChat and making it possible for like PayPal to run on the same technology that WeChat's using. The real problem is China's way of doing things, given their view toward privacy and encryption. Will it really let them scale beyond China, even if their technology is as good as or better than what's coming out of the West? But China's a great place to see like what the future looks like, because it's you know, whether it's WeChat or some of these other type things, they're just like the same thing with tokenization and whatnot. They're just years ahead, even though it's all just pretty much within China. So I'm always looking there for like, what's the next thing that will actually scale globally?
That's right. That's a big opportunity there. I mean, earlier, I think when we were having a panel with Tim Draper, he mentioned Singapore has done a good job in building trust locally, and also eventually I think that citizens enjoy a very high GDP per capita. I mean, we do have, I think, a trust deficit type situation here in this country. Maybe, it is related to China or not related to China, but you've spoken quite a bit, I think publicly about this whole trust deficit situation. What are some of the tools that you see that are available in the marketplace to really build better trust? If you can share more, that would be great.
Yeah, so this is a topic that I'm struggling with, how to better communicate this, even within my own company. So within my own company, people think of us as an identity company. And I've tried to say, look, we're not an identity. We're a customer of identity companies. And there's lots of identity companies like Twilio to verify, Plaid to verify that you can get into your bank account, or on FIDO to verify a particular government ID. We're customers of those companies. And each of these companies, people are running around, there's a lot of great words: privacy, security, transparency. Those are all great values. But to your point, what is lacking in the world, what has been damaged in the world is trust. And trust has been undermined in a number of ways. It's been undermined because of privacy violations, security breaches. It's been undermined by the types of business models we have where there's clickbait. And so we have fake identities and fake news, and people just have gone downhill on trust. And so the question is to change that around. How do we recreate communities? If we know that the Facebook group is not the model for trust in the future, how do we come up with an alternative model that has high engagement, which Facebook has achieved, but it's trusted engagement? How do we rebuild those groups? And the only way I can think to do that is this new world of credentials, where we can go out and collect credentials that are verifiable, not top down from a single source, but a protocol for collecting credentials, and then rejoining groups that have screening criteria so that you know the people that are in those groups are real people. Like one of the companies I invested in, its sole model was for all the congressional candidates and for all the issues like net neutrality that people write to their Congress people. They found that 97% of the people or persons that were supposedly writing to their Congress people on an issue were robots. They weren't real people.
Right.
How do we get back to believing that the people that are in our communities are who they say they are, even if it's privacy preserved? And so we're looking to start with those situations where trust actually matters, where you trust people enough to exchange medical records or to vote, or to have a really heartfelt, open-hearted conversation, and you're not going to get smoked out. And so we think that things that you're already seeing out there today, like digital wallets and messaging, need to happen now in a situation where people can have credentials, but the credentials, we're saying, shouldn't come top down. There should be a protocol, and it should happen on a global space with no one setting the single standard, and you should be able to collect those, and that identity is both a right and a responsibility. You need to collect the credentials so the people that you're looking to, or group that you're looking to engage with, understands and trusts you enough to give you authorization to participate in the conversation, to do commerce, and all these new technologies, NFTs, whatnot, DeFi. How's that going to work without trust? Well, you can say it's going to work like Mad Max. I've got the private key, which is like saying I've got the bullets or I've got the bigger gun, and I'm going to like make this transaction happen because I can. That's great from a technological point of view. It's a disaster from a world where we actually have laws, and authorization requires authentication and a concept of you really are the right person, not simply because you have a technical trustless standard. You're the right person because I trust you are who you say you are. Your credentials are what they are. And I believe because of that, I should give you the permission you seek, and we're both going to benefit. And so that's what needs to be rebuilt in the world. That's our challenge. And that's what I'll be working on for the remainder of my years, because all these other technologies are terrific. They're too efficient. It's one of those things like ready, fire, aim. Just because you can do it doesn't mean you should do it. And we're trying to get the should linked back again to the can. And that's a trust-based answer to a trust deficit problem that we have in the world today.
And we all have a lot of work to do. And I know I have to,
and I'm responsible. We built some of this. I mean, Twitter is like it's a bit of an embarrassment, like what it became. It's amazing, that we made such a mess of things, and that I can't think of any company besides Twitter that has had more of an impact on the world as a technology company. And I obviously I can't say that it's all good. And so mea culpa, we've got some cleanup to do.
Yep, that's right. I know I have to hand it back to Kareem in a couple of minutes, but if I can ask just one last question, Greg. I mean, you're monitoring a number of cryptocurrencies. You've mentioned ETH and perhaps others like Solana or others. Can you quickly just share with the audience what are some of the assets that you are interested in monitoring and why?
Well, the two, every time somebody gives me a white paper and I'm like, there's a saying on a British comedy show, I'd buy that for $1. I'd and I have that moment. So when I met Bastien from Filecoin, and he had this white paper, and I usually can't read more than the first page of the white paper, and then I'm in over my head. But it came up with a concept, it's hard to remember, of proof of stake, which is at the core of Filecoin. And instead of proof of work, which is exhaustive, or consensus, which was Ripple's version, somebody came up with a new way to decide how to secure the system, the ecosystem. And instead of burning up a bunch of carbon, it was proving that you were storing something. And I was like, well, that sounds good. And for Solana, this latest one, besides the fact that Anatoly said, when I asked him where he's from, he said, I'm from the Soviet Union. And I'm like, that's a good answer. He said that, if you want to process things in parallel, on a blockchain, you're going to have to put those things back together. And a way to do that is with proof of history, or what he might call proof of time. So it's a new form of computation. And so when somebody comes through with something that's actually an insight, not just an idea, but a new insight, something that comes from your gut rather than comes from your head, that there's a different way to do things, those are the things that I'm going to leap in for. I only wish I had more at the time to back these people, but I'm looking for those aha moments. It is really the difference between an idea and an insight that is, to me, the best path to figuring out what are going to be the most valuable companies 10 years from now. And it's like a, it's like a treasure hunt to find those things. And Link 2 is one of the reasons I invested in it. Is I'm hoping to find those things and attract people that might tell me where to go for those things. And I often find out about them from people that are just totally unexpected. It just comes totally out of the blue from people that you just wouldn't believe. So you just have to go to the Woody Allen thing. It's 9/10 of it is you just got to show up, but you got to show up at the right events. And and I really appreciate the opportunity of things like Link 2, which is where you can find companies that are maybe on this journey. It is an extreme educational pleasure for me.
And we are very grateful of your sharing today, and also the time that you spend with the board of Link 2, the strategic advisory team. So that was really thoughtful. Thank you so much, Greg. So now let me turn it back to Karim, who may have some questions from the audience. And back to you. The floor is yours.
Thank you first, Chris. Thank you, Greg. It was that was a riveting panel discussion. I mean, Chris, I think, and Greg have answered all the questions. There is a lot of chat on the side, but I don't think we have the time right now to engage with that. But we will, if you give us permission, try to do a lunch conversation or a separate event where we can get more
Separate event, yeah.
With these amazing companies that you're looking for. I do want us to cover a little bit more about how we're identifying companies that are going to be the future of the companies that we can bring to our clients here on Link 2. So thank you, guys. Thank you so much for your time today.
You're welcome. Yeah. Okay.
Bye-bye, guys.
Thanks.